So we are going to make a start on this little delight. Quite complex, quite small, rather detailed, and the first thing to do is to mark it out with a small stone so far as is humanly possible, and where it isn't, a small diamond. And all we're going to do to begin with is take the very top surface off the glass to give a key for anything else that follows and to get the design marked permanently on. And as you can see, there are quite a few tiny little extras and details to consider. So let us begin. As you hopefully can see, I have a very small fine silicon carbide stone in the drill. It didn't begin this small, it's just worn down rather, and it's perfect for getting into tiny little nooks and crannies. And I am going to remove just the very top surface. And if you'll forgive me, I'm only going to do the broader areas because I'm going to need both hands to do the smaller ones. So we're just going to have a little look at how this works. And you can see, I hope, that I am working gently in a slightly circular way and keeping the ink lines for as long as possible so I maintain my drawing, and I've got a reference point for the next stage. And it may be a bit tricky against the white to see what's happening, so in a second I'm going to stop the drill and put a little piece of black velvet inside the glass. Let's just get the helm roughly marked in. And again, the point of this exercise is to fix the engraving, fix the drawing permanently, because now there is no going back, onto the glass. And glass, by its very nature being slippery, means that every other tool I use on these areas will have a surface key to find their way in. Right, let's pop some black in behind there and just shift the dust. And you can see that there's a very, very loose, soft surface there. Well, you can't actually because it's not focusing very well. That's better. You can also see that I've left things like the space in the helmet, which will ultimately be a dark section, the slit through which the wearer would look. I shall put that in with a white stone and polish it, but we'll come to that later. Things have moved on a little bit now, and as you can see, the helmet is joined by its mantling and the crest, and as we move back a little bit you can see that the mystical magical creatures, Pegasus and the Wyvern, are roughed in, and so is the bridge. A little bit faint. I'll go back into it in a second. The bridge was put in using a very sharp, very small ball diamond, one shot only in this particular instance because there's no room for manoeuvre. And if you look at the wavy line above the motto, the ribbon, I'll point, finger coming in, just here, you may just about notice that it's slightly different in texture to the centre of the shield. Now the reason for that is that the waterline has been taken out using a very fine white stone, an Arkansas stone, because ultimately that's going to be a very soft dark tone to indicate the blue of the water, whereas this is going to be the gold in the central section of the shield, and that's been taken out using that same silicon carbide that I used on the helm. The other two sections of the shield need to be taken out with the Arkansas stone as well, because again these are going to be darker in tone to indicate the blue of the shield. They will have some other markings on them, we'll come to that later. So I've got an Arkansas stone in here, white, soft, just going to take the top surface off the glass, and I'll do a tiny bit just so you can hopefully see, particularly if we come down. Coming right down hard against the area that had the silicon carbide, the white section in the centre, and hopefully you'll see it's very, very slightly more silvery in tone. And the great thing about it is that it polishes back with a softish polisher very easily and gives a good soft tone which contrasts to the silicon carbide in the centre. It's a little bit monotonous to watch, so I'm not going to do it all for you now. You'll have to trust me that I'm doing the same thing with the rest of it. I will show you when it's all filled in and take you to the next stage. But you get the general gist, I hope. I'll just give it one more buff. And weirdly, as you go over it the second time, it sort of polishes itself as well. They're very curious the way they respond to the glass, or the glass responds to them. All part of the mystery. There we are. All done. First coat. As you can see, I've continued with the Arkansas across here and the lower section of the shield. And you get this contrast now between the Arkansas and the silicon carbide, the green stone in the centre. And I've also introduced the Arkansas now into the helm, this eye slot, which I had left clear. Now you might ask, why bother with that? Could we not just leave it clear glass? Well, you could do, but then it wouldn't have the appearance of a hollow, emptied out form. This is supposed to indicate a helmet, which would have an inside and a back to it. So in order to make that feeling of solidity, by taking the eye slot out and then polishing it back to a dark colour, in inverted commas, it'll have a patina and it'll feel like there is an inside to it, rather than being a slightly derelict two-dimensional shape. And I've got here a polishing wheel. It's fairly soft and flexible, as you can see. I can push it around with the tip of my finger, and with that, if I take that gently across the helm, I can reintroduce that dark slot. I'm doing it quite crudely because I'm going to have to model the helmet as well, but I just want you to see what happens with 2 or 3 touches with the soft polisher, and we're starting to get the illusion of darkness and the feeling that there is an inside to this helmet. And similarly, if I take this polisher across the shield, it'll push that tone back several layers and give me a much darker tone to introduce the other detail. And it occurs to me that you have not yet seen the sorry, making a woggle, the original coat of arms that I'm working from, so perhaps I could just introduce you to the challenges that lie ahead. And there you have it. So watch this space and we will do more shortly. There. As you can see, I have now taken a polisher over the Arkansas areas in the same way that I did on the helmet. So the shield is now two-tone. I've also used a very small ball diamond, this little person here, to catch the outer edge of the shield very gently, and to just make sure that the top edge of what will eventually be the gold section of the shield is crisp and gives a good contrast to the Arkansas polished area. Since which time, if we come back a little way, you will see that I've also started to work up the bridge, which supports the shield and the Pegasus and the Wyvern and everything else that's going on. And if you look at the right hand side, you can see where I marked it in originally with a very fine and extremely sharp ball diamond, and it's a slightly crinkly line, but it's there. Struck it in over the top of the ink, and then on the other side, if we come across, you can see that I've used the same small ball diamond to build up the structure, and then switched over to a nice sharp rat's tail to introduce the little railings in between. And that really is a one shot, because if you don't get it right first time, going back is a bit of an issue. We might have to change it to filigree or something, I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure we can find a way around it. We can always solve a problem, can't we? We can always solve a problem, as you all know. Right, so I'm just going to do a tiny weeny bit of this, because holding holding the phone to film and steering the ball on the glass is a bit perilous. So I'm going to do a very simple section, but I wanted you to see it is literally, I'm just putting it on top of the mark that I've made. You can hear it as it hits the glass. And I'm very gently holding it on top of the mark and pulling it gently along in a sort of running stitch. So each time going back slightly into the mark before. What happens is that the diamond, provided you don't press too hard, finds the groove. Got to get into the groove, and makes it slightly stronger, slightly crisper, slightly wider. Now there are two reasons for doing it this way. The first is if you're doing a short mark and it starts to go off, the going off doesn't go off too far. And the reason for not pressing too hard is if you think about the tool that you're working with, although it's a very small diamond, the harder you press, the deeper it will bite, and the more of the diameter of the diamond burr is going to be in contact with the glass. Therefore, my friends, your mark will get wider because you are pressing down a little too hard. I hope that makes sense, and I hope it wasn't too fuzzy, but you get the general gist, I trust. Okay, we're going to move on to the next stage, and we're going to start to look at a little bit of modelling now. just for a second, take a little look at this section, which is with the area that's simply blocked out very, very lightly in the first instance with the silicon carbide. And the same is true if I turn it very slightly for the helm and the mantling and the crest. But if I turn this glass very slowly, you can see that on the other side I have moved things along a little further, and the helm and the mantling and Pegasus have all had some treatment with a little cutting stone, and there it is, little ordinary green, slightly coarse stone, which is great for getting into tiny tight corners and starting to develop the three-dimensional form of these areas. Why don't I use a diamond to do that? I don't use a diamond to do that because the diamond would create a very specific and quite crisp deep line, which is then very difficult to open out and model and soften. And if we're trying to, for instance, create this area down here, the haunch, the muscles, the rising chest and up through the skull, we need to scoop them out rather than create a little trench. So these areas, although it looks like a sharp line, beyond that point the stone has also softly removed the glass. I'm not actually doing anything here, I'm just indicating. Has just very gently shaped and modelled the sort of curve of that muscle. And the same is true up here on the mantling. In order to create this sort of three-dimensional form of this rise and fall of the fabric of the mantling, there's some depth in here, and there's a little bit of depth in here with the stone. There's a lot more in here. Hope that makes sense. So let's have a little go with the little green stone on the wyvern, just so you get a general idea of what happens. I'm only going to do a small section, but if, for instance, we take it oh, missing. Sorry. You can see that even just with a few short marks, already that tiny section of the upper limb is stepping in front of the chest. And if we take it down here, likewise you can see that beginning to come forward. It's only a fraction of a millimetre deeper so far. Go into the toe, start to bring that in front of the shield. Curious business, glass engraving. Whoever knew that you would need to manicure or pedicure a wyvern? There you go. Takes you all sorts of curious places. There you go. I think that's probably enough for the purposes of this exercise. I'll start to bring up the rest of it, and we'll come back to it together later on. Since last we met, I have now finished working away with the little cutting stone, the little sharp-ended hard stone, and introduced the basic modelling into the woven and the other half of the helm and the mantling, and even used it up into the lions on the crest up here. They're very crudely modelled at the minute, but it's given a little bit of shape and a little bit of depth to their limbs, as it has on the lighthouse and on all the various details. And if we go in a little bit closer on the wyvern, and it will focus, that's better, you can see quite clearly where this stone has bitten in a little bit more deeply. And the next step will be to take a very fine diamond and start to work out some of this detail a little more. So I will do some of that, and then we will revisit it together so that you can see what's been happening, and we'll talk about little things like what happens with the gaps, because we have to mind the gap, and that will come in a short while. When last we spoke, this was all at the stage really of using the little green stone to do some basic modelling, and so most of the sections, with the exception probably of the bridge beneath, were at this point. And you can see still that I have left Pegasus alone, but I have now worked up, let's turn it round so you can see, I have now worked up the helmet and the mantling and the lighthouse and the little lions by using the small ball diamond to crisp up the modelling where the stone left off and to refine edges very gently, and the same is true around here of the wyvern. It's quite important to remember that you need to, she says, reaching and putting everything out of focus, as you work with a small ball diamond, it's important to remember that when you are using the small ball diamond to pick up on detail and clean up edges, that you place the diamond so that the bulk of the diamond, particularly with edges, is actually inside the engraved area, and you are just very gently pulling against the broken edge, so that you very, very slowly and gently ease it out and even it up. Because what we're not after doing is engraving great trenches around everything. And this is exactly the process that I used on the mantling. If you watch also where the stone has created little dips to create the modelling, I'm also going to use the diamond very gently over some of those areas to give a little bit more emphasis. Not taking a huge amount more away, but just crisping it slightly, so that, for instance, where the ear on the griffin comes in front of the head, or the skull rather, it's just that tiny bit deeper, which helps to increase the three-dimensional illusion. And similarly, I'm just going to come in a little bit closer, hopefully it will continue to focus. This rather wonderful little section of, I'm not sure what to call it, beard? Whatever. Comes over the neck. I'm using the diamond to pull against the edge that the stone has made and just emphasise it slightly, and then working it back gently. Small, circular, very light movements, pulling back from the edge and blending that in. So now hopefully his jawline is a bit more emphasised and standing out in front of his neck, and it's all a little bit sharper and a little bit crisper. And the reason for using the diamond to do that is that whilst the stone is a marvellous tool for creating shape and form, it's not brilliant at giving a defined finish. The two need to work in tandem. Those of you who were paying attention in the last little bit of film will have noticed I referred to him as a griffin. Well, of course, he's not a griffin, he's a wyvern. However, be that as it may, I also a little while ago talked about gaps. And if you look closely, you can still see areas of clear glass. For instance, inside his ear, his eye, around the chain that holds his jewel, on the wings, particularly here, because that little section there, the dark bit, is obviously the wing at the back. Now all of those things need to be brought together to unify the whole thing. And at the moment, those black lines are in the most part where the ink was, where the drawing was, and that's helped me to keep the shapes. But now really I need to bring the whole lot together before I go on to the next step of the modelling. So what I have in here is an Arkansas stone, the very fine white, and I'm just going to very, very gently, I'll work the head and the wing so you can see, very gently going to take away those clear sections to start to bring the whole thing together. And in theory, hopefully in practice, you will still see a contrast on the surface of the glass. So I'm not losing the positions of these elements. And I will be able to go back to them and, for instance, put the eye in, because obviously that's fairly fundamental. So you can see where he's meant to be doing his supporting. You can see it's such a soft stone, it's not taking away and breaking down those edges that I created just now with the diamond modelling. Let's take it over the wing. And if you recall on the shield, because this is such a soft stone, it polishes back very easily. Just creates a very gentle ground. So a little later, when I want to push this wing back behind, it should polish remarkably easily. Get rid of the dust. You'll be able to see what's happening. That's probably enough for you to see. You can see that it hasn't taken away the definition, but it has joined everything up together and made him look a little bit more as one. And I guess you might ask, why did I not do this sooner? Well, for the very simple fact that I wanted to preserve the drawing for as long as I possibly could, in order to get the elements all in the right place. And so by gradually doing this, by gradually building up the image, it means that my drawing is essentially there for as long as it possibly can be. And when you look next, hopefully the wyvern will be all linked up, and we can take a look at the next step of the modelling. The gaps are all filled, and most of the modelling is done, but there is one section that's slightly lacking, and it's this piece down through here, the wyvern's body. At the minute it's got quite a lot of modelling on its belly, and quite a crisp line down the spine, but the section in the middle needs to look a little bit more rounded. If I polish this now, it'll go completely flat, because there's nothing other than the initial grinding on that area. So I've put in a slightly bigger silicon carbide than I used last, and I'm going to just gently take the centre out of the body, lessening the pressure as I come down towards the line of the bridge and up towards the wing, because it needs to disappear at either end, and coming back again down through the body, and this is where the main emphasis needs to be. It's not about increasing the pressure, it's about the number of times any given section is worked. And I'm coming back several times to this particular area, because it needs to look as if it curves towards us and comes over the top of the tail. So again, just taking a little bit more away as it disappears up under the wing. I'm using the flat of this conical shaped stone, not the tip. So I get the smoothest possible. As you can see, it's very slightly narrower than the area I'm attacking, which means I get a nice smooth finish, and I won't need to do too much more to it with a diamond to even it out. Hopefully that has brought the whole section closer to us, and because this is slightly shallower, the tail looks as if it dips in and goes behind. Eye time. They say the eye has it, and let's hope the eye has it in this case. The next step, if you recall, I just took a white stone very lightly over the surface where the eye is to go. I've now got a ball diamond in, which is a reasonable size, and I'm going to let that sit on the surface where the eye is to go, and just gently bite in and make a little dish in the surface of the glass. Once I've done that, I shall take a white stone, this little one, which is, as you can see, very tired and nearly finished off, and I'm going to let that sit into the same mark and very, very gently pre-polish, because this is an Arkansas, so it will silver the surface, it'll refine it slightly, which will then mean that the polishing, which will probably be done mostly with the edge of this, which is a very hard and unforgiving polisher, but really good for bringing up a dark shine, should just sit down into that little dish and bring up the brightness of the eye. So let's give it a try, shall we? Let's see how we get on. Right, first things first, said diamond. go, that's created a little cavity, as you can see, I hope. I'm going to stop filming for a second while I change the drill bit. Right, now for the Arkansas. And just gently letting that sit into the same mark. Not increasing the depth overall, but just smoothing that surface that the diamond created, which is a bit dense and a bit white, and now making it a little bit more silvery. There we go. I don't know whether you can see the variation in that. It's quite tricky to get the light right for it, but anyway, let's give it one more go. So now we have an indent, which if I get rid of my hands need a jolly good sort out, don't they? Too much gardening. Right. So the next step will be the polisher. I'm going to turn you off again. Here's the polisher. Jolly hard. It's got quite a sharp edge to it, so it should sit down into that little hole reasonably easily. And there we have a bright eye. Now whilst I've got this polisher in, I'm also going to catch the inside of the ear. So that now has an inside and an outside. And I will probably use it for things like polishing the centre of the jewel, because that on the image is quite a dark stone, so I'll do that shortly as well. And my next step will be to introduce some other polish into different areas. I will endeavour to show you. This is the same flexible polishing wheel that I used on the shield earlier on, and I've popped it back in because I'm going to use it to just push that wing that's behind the head away very gently, and down inside that little gap in there, and that in turn has made the head stand out a bit more. Use the same polisher to just create a little bit of shadow underneath the jawline. Doesn't matter if you go a little bit across the boundaries at this stage, because everything's going to need a bit of a tweak, and probably a little bit into the eye cavity, a bit of eyeliner, and underneath the collar. Just emphasises the detail of the links where the jewel is hanging from the collar, and so on. So I will continue with this polisher for a bit, and then I'll come back to you and show you the results. Pegasus has been tidied up, and all the clear sections have been blended, as you can see, and I have prepared the eye in the same way that I've prepared the eye on the griffin. But I want to swing around very slowly. You can see the mantling also is ready to go on that side. If we turn it, you will find that I have quietly been working away on more of the detail, introducing polish where it's needed, and we'll go around to the griffin, and you can see that he is pretty much up together. So let's just talk you through one or two things here. Given that it's quite tiny and requires a bit of manoeuvring, I've cheated slightly, and I've put the scales in your absence, and I've used the tip of a very, very fine rat's tail to simply draw over the top of the shape that I've made, just catching the edge of the scales very, very lightly, so there's just a suggestion of it going through the body. And I have also increased the polish, as you can see, through sections like this to accentuate the definition. And then if we go up to the mantling, you will see that I've also introduced some marking. Now, traditionally, engravers would use demarcations to suggest different colours, tinctures, to give it a technical term. And so, for instance, these parallel lines here indicate to anybody who's in the know that that section of the mantle is blue. This cross here, this cross-hatching, tells you that that area is black. And then I've introduced the little gold spots that show on the original. And that's all done by, first of all, polishing the whole of that section back. And then again, as with the scales on the griffin, using a very fine rat's tail and just very, very lightly running it across the surface to get those parallel lines. And so I have got to do the same on the other side. I've also polished the lion's bodies back and polished in the windows on the lighthouse, and dealt with the definition on the helm. So you can see it's all starting to come together. And I will do a little bit of polishing for you on this section over here, just so that you can see how I got from that to that, and probably a little bit of polish on Pegasus as well, if you just give me a few minutes. Right, I have a knife edge polisher. Well, it was once knife edge. It's a bit blunt now, but it'll do the job, and it's soft, relatively flexible, so it should get down into the marking, into the engraved surface reasonably easily. And all of these little areas here eventually are going to have to be, as with the other one on the other side, taken back to indicate the colour variant, the tincture. So I need to give it a background, and this is getting down into the groove very gently. And I'll probably need to do this 2 or 3 times to get it back to the colour I want, tone I want. Maybe assisted by a bee. And again, it's not a question of pressing harder. It's a question of frequency. So taking it back gradually. There is a bit of grit in this polisher, so it is taking the surface down a little bit at the same time and smoothing it. Now it's nearly dark enough, but you can see just with that little bit what a difference that's made already. I could also use this polisher, for instance, underneath the collar on the unicorn. Not the unicorn, he hasn't got a horn. On Pegasus. So we just push that in there a little way. It'll help to push the collar off and to get the body of the beast behind his medal. And we can push it into the limb at the back. And a little bit up into the chest. And you can see, because the cutting of the jewel is quite deep, this polisher is catching on the body around it, which is standing slightly proud. You can take it down there into the leg as well. A bit of polish on his knee. A bit more under there. And so on. So the next time you see him, hopefully he will be all polished up and we'll be ready to look at putting some detail on the shield. Time to return to the shield and look at the detail that needs to go on top of the ground that I prepared earlier on. There it is on the original, and if we move slowly down away from that to the glass, you can see the groundwork there, and if I now pop something white inside it, you will see that I have loosely drawn the details for the top and the bottom section, and to do that I've used an ordinary lead pencil. If you use a spirit pen or even the carbon, you find that the ink or the carbon tend to attach themselves rather well to the glass and be almost impossible to remove. Much better to use a lead pencil because you can use an ordinary eraser and some soap and water to get rid of it. So that's where we begin, and then I shall take a diamond and mark those details in and refine them, so that the next time you see this it will be a little further forward. Top and bottom sections are now complete, and as you can see I have put in the parallel horizontal lines to indicate the blue of the ground. Now for the fun bit, because the central section has an image of Tower Bridge dark against the gold. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to polish back the gold where the bridge is going to sit. Then we're going to draw the bridge in. We, using the term loosely, I am going to draw the bridge in, and then I am going to re-engrave the gold back around the polish, so the polish gives the image of the bridge. I hope that is clear. We'll see. So I've got a flexible polishing wheel in. I'm going to take that across this ground. Two or three times. Push it right back. can already see there's quite a contrast. Oops, sorry. And that will give me the tone of the bridge. And there are going to be 2 towers. So I'm loosely going to polish 2 sections here and here. Probably need to go out a little bit further than that. Make sure we cover enough ground. And also, we've got to get the piers of the towers in as well, so we need to go down a bit. And right to the edge. Underneath the griffin's toes. Not the griffin, the wyvern. Done it again. Take it back a touch more. A little bit more contrast. Once again, I shall draw that in with pencil on top of that, and then trim back with a diamond in between the areas of the bridge to leave the bridge in dark against the light ground. And there we have it. I must confess I did that behind closed doors because it is rather fiddly. Anyway, I hope that it's clear enough to see that the crudely polished out shape that I made previously, I then trimmed back using this little ball diamond, which is fairly blunt, so doesn't take too much glass away and doesn't dig into the surface, just very, very gently peels away the polish and restores the paler, the ground surface. So we've got the gold and we've got the dark of the bridge shape, and then we've got these little spots, and this is another tincture. This is the indication that this is signifying a gold section across the centre of the shield. So all that remains now is the motto down here. I have to put the words in on the band, on the ribbon. So I'm going to take the same approach as I took here. I'm going to polish this back with a soft polisher to a dark tone. And I'm going to draw the lettering on with a pencil. And when I've done that, I will come back to you and show you where it is. And then I will just demonstrate a tiny little bit of this process, because it's slightly easier to show on here because it's a little bit bigger than that was. There we have it, and you can probably see, if I just turn the glasses slightly, by the amount of splurgy lead. It's taken me 2 or 3 goes to get the position right and the balance of the lettering relatively even. It is very crude, but it gives me enough to get the basics down. So if I just take the little ball diamond, and we'll start in the centre because it's probably easier to get the balance and for you to see what's happening. Just very, very gently out beyond my pencil lines to start with. start to remove the polish again. And if I take the paper away from inside, and let the light back in, you can see what's starting to happen. And I'll do that all the way around all of the letters to start with, and so on. I'm not following the drill very easily because I'm looking at the glass and not the picture. And you get the general gist. I'll get it all done to that level and then come back to you, and you can see me trim one or two up perhaps. There we are, moved on a little bit further. The nice thing about this process is that if you lose a little bit of a letter in the trimming back, because the layers that you're removing are so thin, you can always repolish a section and retrim it, provided that you keep the pressure off the diamond. For instance, when I come to look at this T, I think I'm probably going to have to slightly rebalance it because that arm is slightly shorter than that one. This can be trimmed back a little bit more. And the centre can be trimmed back a tiny bit more, which will rebalance it slightly. But even so, that arm is very slightly shorter. So I can repolish that little section there and retrim it to get it right. It's not a very exciting process, this, and it is quite tiny movements, and there's a certain amount of push-me-pulley that goes on. You can see there on that E I've gone up too high, so I'm going to need to bring that back down and repolish the top of that. So it's just tiny layers of glass each time, adjusting it very slightly, trying to keep the balance across the phrase, and gradually adjust it. And again, I may need to just very gently repolish the top of that E to get it down a little bit further, but it's getting there slowly. We shall return. Phew. Well, that was a bit of a mission. Anyway, I think we're there. We're done. Was a bit push-me-pull-you, a little bit of having to polish back and redo on several of the letters. But anyway, all that remains now is for me to strip off the sellotape, which has been protecting all the unengraved areas. Give it a wash, a bit of a polish, and then I'll try and take a photograph of it in its entirety in better light. Thank you for keeping me company as I've worked on it, and I hope you found it useful and informative and helpful for those of you who are going to have a go at some heraldry in the near future, or indeed anything else, because all these skills that have been deployed on this particular piece are applicable to pretty much anything else that you're likely to want to tackle. And maybe we'll have a look at some other subject areas in due course. Thank you.